town.
As the rolling sea.
I like this part right here. Come on.
Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on.
Let us march on.
Till victory is won.
Now we add a little something to it. Just to encourage you. We're going to take you to church later. Let's go.
We'll keep marching right until the victory is won.
To all my brothers out there.
Hold your head up, brother, till the victory is won.
To all my sisters in the struggle.
Keep believing, sister, till the victory is won.
Till that day.
Till that day comes.
Hey.
Let us march on
To victory.
till victory is won. Is won.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Lea Dotson, and I am not a professional host. I work as a high school principal, but I felt that this was really necessary, given some of the information that people bring to me. So I decided to bring this thought to Pastor Todd and just discuss an idea with him that I thought that I wanted to get some information out to the community. And graciously, Pastor Todd saw this as a good part to add to his whole empowerment series. And so here we are today at 2 o'clock with you all talking about barriers to success in education, a resource for parents of students on an IEP or a 504, or just information about what that whole process is. So I do want to thank Pastor Todd for being so understanding and gracious enough to set this up for us. It's during Black History Month. Black history, our history is a history of resiliency and empowerment. Is bigger than Harriet and Malcolm and Martin. It's bigger than that. We have a legacy of resiliency and empowerment. So this fits squarely into Black History Month. So again, I thank Pastor Todd and Second Baptist Church. Also, during Black History Month, just a few shout outs. We really want to encourage us to support Black business during this time. Support it at any time, but really during Black History Month, support Black business. We have plenty of Black businesses between here and Youngstown. Support them all. We have we have Marquita Lau's insurance agency and his, hers, and ours podcast. You're going to hear from her later on this week. Aries Coleman. There's just a litany of Black businesses. Of course, got to shout out my homegirl, Andrea Daniels with Harriet's Apothecary. Shameless plug, go kick it with my girl, 458 High Street. If you looking to get your soaps and candles and holistic health products like free from like performative allyship, meet Andrea down at Harriet's Apothecary across the street from Noaka House. So support Black business. We are here. That's going to be talked about another day, but right now we are talking about education. And I am not doing this alone. We also have with us the wonderful cheerleading coach extraordinaire, and other people may not understand or know, also parent advocate who is also a wealth of knowledge on this particular subject, Miss Andrea Hudson.
Hi, everybody. Yes, hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Hudson. I am the owner and head coach of Cheer Image Icons, recreation cheerleading team in Warren. And also, most importantly, I have a 19-year-old son named Elijah who has autism, and I have been dealing with this whole IEP process since his diagnosis at age 7. So I'm just here to help answer any questions and give you guys information on the process and how powerful parents really are.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. We also have another special guest who just loves us so much. She is joining us all the way from Georgia, Miss Terri West. So, Terri West, hey, Terri.
Hello, I am Terri West. I am a special education administrator here in the state of Georgia, but I am originally from the one and only Warren, Ohio. Um, of course, I advocate for students as well. My on the spectrum as well as gifted. So you get both worlds and it exists. But I am here to also advocate and give you the legal aspect of special education and just help them any way I can with answering questions.
Thank you. So, thanks for joining us, Terri. Thanks for joining us, Andrea. So, let's to clarify, we are not here to bash school systems. Woo, we have a job in the school systems right now with COVID. Um, it's rough on teachers and administrators alike. This is not to bash the school systems. My experience has been 80% of the people that I work with in any given school system are really good people and really want the right things, but nobody is absolutely perfect. Our point here today is not a bash on anybody's school system, anybody's teachers, but it is strictly so that we understand what the process is so that we can advocate for our children. There is absolutely no teacher, no principal, nobody on planet Earth who is going to or should advocate for your child more than you, but unfortunately a lot of times we just don't know the information and we learn it through trial and error. So our hopes today is to give you that information in the forefront so it helps you through this process, because it's a really important process. Also to destigmatize IEPs. We still have people in our community that think IEPs and special education is like the equivalent of like riding a short bus.
Bad thing.
Yeah.
A bad thing.
Like,
or an embarrassment.
yeah.
It's not.
Like, yeah.
Right.
It's there to help.
It's absolutely there to help. I get short bus jokes
Yeah.
still, and I'm like, no, because
Right.
No.
there are some geniuses
Yeah.
in with an
Break it down.
IEP.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we want to like kill that stigma and really empower our community to move forward and get the resources that are out there, but we don't always take advantage of. So with that, we are going to dive in so that we can be efficient and not waste y'all time on this good Saturday. Oh,
Like and share. Share the page. Share. Come down. We're here live at Second Baptist. Like, share, send the link out. Just get the word out.
yep. All right. So, understanding special education. We can go to the next slide. So we use this a lot in education. Back when we were young, y'all remember when we were young, we all was in the same room,
Yes.
except for them couple of kids that they
That-
pulled out, and
that
it was
got
just a
pulled out.
stigma.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
It was just a stigma because it's like, oh, they going to the slow classes.
Yeah.
They
So it
isolated
is.
them from us.
What'd you say, Terri?
They isolated them from us
Yeah.
completely.
Yes.
Removed them.
Yes,
Mhm.
it was an isolation, but everybody was in the same room. This is not how education is done nowadays. We are really in education. We are focused on differentiation. So through the years, unfortunately for us, they didn't know, we didn't get
Right.
that. But through the years, we found out that you could have a litany of different learners in one classroom. So you could have, that's why there's a lot of groups in different classrooms. So you literally have all those different groups, high learners, medium learners, students who need support all in one classroom. And I think this is just a good illustration just to start us off, just to destigmatize what we're talking about is that, it says that everybody's a genius. But what does it say? Because I don't have it. But basically what it's saying is for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. All of those, that's not their forte. So really recognizing the individuality of every student, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're here for, and that's what education is in 2022. You can go to the next slide. threw this one in as a sign of equality versus equity. On the left, we see equality, where everybody got the same box. Just because everybody gets the same thing don't mean everybody gets the same results.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
another thing that we focus on in education is something called equity, where if you notice, you know, we may have to give certain people a little bit more in order to, be able to compete, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I say all this to say this is just a good introduction, because I really want everybody to understand that the IEP and special ed process is not a knock to your child.
It is not.
It is not. It is a protection for your child.
Mhm.
If you have an administrator or a teacher that says we need to test your child, I think Andrea, you can speak to this because you were
Yes.
saying.
Back when Elijah was first diagnosed, well, before he was diagnosed, I really got to give credit to my husband. He was the one that pushed and pushed and pushed for Elijah to get testing. Me, on the other hand, I was in denial about any type of diagnosis. There was nothing wrong with him. He was the only child. So no, he's not gonna talk early. And my husband just kept saying, "No, something's wrong. We need to test." And I'm like, "No, no, you just don't know what you're talking about." And it really was, to me, I felt that if there was something wrong, it would have been my fault, carrying, even though I went through, the whole 9 months, didn't smoke, didn't drink, went to all of my prenatals, I did everything right. So how can something be wrong? And it took for the school. Elijah was in kindergarten. He was running out the class like a game because he wanted the teachers to chase him. And they're like, well, he's not playing with the other kids. They were calling it parallel play. And I'm just like, what is that? What is parallel
Jargon.
play?
We hate jargon.
What is that? And so it really took for us to really sit down and have the conversation. And that's when I was like, okay, well, we can get them tested. So one thing that we did was went out, got a referral, took him to get tested. Doctor came in all of 5 minutes, said, "Hey, he has ADHD. Put him on this med."
We're going to talk about that too. You're going to continue. We have an overdiagnosis of ADHD with our black boys in our
Yeah.
community.
Absolutely.
So, and Terri can speak to that, which I'm going to, I'm absolutely going to kick that to Terri later on. But yes, go ahead.
And it was just like, he has ADHD. Put him on this, and that's it. And we left that doctor's appointment just feeling unease, and went back to our pediatrician and said, we want a second opinion. That's when they sent us up to University in Cleveland. We were there for like 6 hours, and that's when he finally got diagnosed with PDD-NOS, which is no longer a diagnosis that they use now. It's just all a form of autism. And so that right there changed the whole narrative as to where we went next in his education.
Right. But see how long that process took. We are trying to save some of you from that process, right? So, the way that this format is gonna work is, if you can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about 5 different things that we feel are the most important in helping parents advocate. The IEP process, what is the difference between accommodations versus modifications? Especially, there's a big difference between modifications and accommodations, and you probably should know those in order to really kind of be a partner in this process. What's an IEP? What's a 504 plan? You get people that teachers are recommended a 504 versus an IEP. What's the difference between those? What happens if you're denied service? Because you can request it, like you can say, something's wrong with my child, and they can say, your child gets good grades. There's nothing wrong with your baby. So what happens if you are denied for service? And special education and discipline. I'm a firm believer that a lot of the discipline problems that we see sometimes with our children in our communities is because they have some underlying needs and some underlying special education needs, but they are being dealt with from a discipline standpoint,
From a behavioral
standpoint, for sure. So At the end of each session, we are going to open it up for questions. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. Yes, next slide. Sorry. So, step one. Child is identified as possibly needing special education and related services. So, Terri, can you kind of just talk our audience through child find and a referral or a request for evaluation? Like, what's the difference between those two?
So, child find, each school in the state is required to basically find students who may have a disability or a need. They should have programs in place within the school, within the community. So you want to reach out to students, whether they're in the school, homelessness. You want to reach and basically find a child that may um, be of need of services. That's what child find is. As far as what was the other question?
Um,
With the I'm multitasking here, you guys. So I'm sorry if you
oh,
see
that's
me looking
okay.
off.
Just the two different ways that you can get referred to the IEP process. So you can do with child find,
So
which is like you said, the teachers.
refer to the IEP process. The RTI, that process should be in place, and that will be it's a tier step program, which is given to all students. It's like three tiers, and basically it first starts with classroom curriculum activities. If your child is not making progress with that, then they're monitoring them. They go on to another step, which is the second tier, and they specifically work with your student in groups or individually. And if that's not working, they go on to a third process. And if that third process is more critical and crucial, if that's not effective and the child isn't making progress with that, then a referral can be made from the school. As a parent, however, if you notice some things, you can request for your child to be evaluated for services. But it is a process. You can't just say something's wrong and you're going to get special ed services.
Right.
Once a referral is made, the MDT team, they decide if the child will be evaluated. If the answer is yes, then a referral is made for special ed services, and then the team will go ahead and evaluate the student for special ed with the consent of the parent.
Right.
Um,
So, what I heard you saying that is that each school and each classroom has mechanisms in place where they deal with the whole class, and if nothing is working within those mechanisms that we have in place, this is where we get leveled up into now we need an individual education plan because everything that we're doing as a collective is not working. So this is what an
right,
IEP is. It's an individual education plan because we need something individual for your
child.
student. Yes. So you see how that is a
exactly.
bonus.
Right. Right.
Yes,
We gonna
yes.
individually
Yep.
work with your student.
Mhm.
So yes,
And this is their plan, and this is what the teachers in the school follows for your child to be successful.
Right.
right,
It's a specialized service for your child individually, not to be confused with as a whole. Intervention should be in
Right.
place in the school, in the classroom. The teacher should be using differentiated methods
Mm-hmm.
because some students, unfortunately, they don't qualify for special ed. The
Right.
teacher just need to step their game up um, and implement differentiated methods to reach each student. However, with all that in place, if we're still not meeting the students' needs, then we need to go on and refer them to special education, where we individualize a plan for them to make adequate progress based on their individual needs.
Mm-hmm.
right. So again, and the biggest point that I want our audience to take away from this is that if you see something,
Right.
That's
speak
right.
up. If you see it, you don't have to wait for anybody to tell you about your child. If you see something, speak up. So we're gonna get to that next. We can go to the
And I
next
want to
slide.
say,
Oh, go ahead.
going back to child, I was going to say, going back to child find, that's the difference. Child find, you're not bringing them to them. They should be looking for it without someone
Right.
bringing it or
Okay.
referring. They should be
Okay.
looking for them. That's the difference with child find. You're actually
Yes.
finding a child, the title.
Right. Right.
That's the difference.
So we can go to the next slide. And remember, if you have any comments, keep them or put them in the chat. We have somebody who is paying that attention. Oh, thanks. Yay. Thanks, Pastor Todd. Yay. So step two. After we identify that the child is in need of special education, either through child find or through a parent referral, the child is evaluated. I want to speak specifically to the holistic nature of this evaluation, just so you as parents understand that it is not just a quick evaluation. It is
Yeah.
not something that and if it turns into something quick, which I doubt, because
It
special,
shouldn't.
yeah, special education teachers know the law.
Yeah.
So they know this is a holistic process. They are looking at their health, their vision, their hearing, social emotional status, which is super important, and we're going to talk about that later, general intelligence, and academic performance. So Andrea, do you have any kind of thing to add to this
Um,
process, about the evaluation process?
well, when he was evaluated at university.
Oh, okay. Which brings up another point. So, Terri, I'm gonna kick this to you. But so, say we went through child find. You were found to be in need of being evaluated for special ed services. Or you didn't go through child find and you feel like something is wrong. What is the course of action that you can take as far as a outside evaluation that you can bring into the IEP process?
Okay, so if you believe something's, you feel your child is having a disability, has a disability, first you can have a written request for evaluation
Mm-hmm.
for your student with the school. Now you can do a personal one, a private doctor, and have them evaluate your student, but best practice would be to simply go to the school. The school has to accommodate you with that. They have to evaluate if you have in a writing that you want your child to be evaluated. They have 60 days to do so to move
Yes,
forward with
yes.
this process.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
you don't
that
have to.
is
What we in a public school, we don't want um, parents paying money to have these things done. We, want them to have a free, appropriate education. Therefore, if there's a need for evaluation, you put that in writing and say, "I want my child evaluated for services."
And that is an extremely important point that Terri just brought up. Put it
It in
in
writing.
writing. Say it again.
Put it in
Hmm.
Put it
writing.
in writing.
But in
Put
writing,
it in writing.
because it doesn't
It is
Leave a
exist
a
if
paper
it don't
trail.
if it's not on black and white. Does not exist. I mean, I hate
okay.
to say
Yes.
that, but good practice for both school and parents. Everything
Hmm.
in writing.
Put
Yes.
everything in writing. So I've actually had people inbox me, and I kind of walk them through this process. It could be as simple as, you do not have to be a lawyer. It
Right.
is as
Yep.
simple as time, date, um, your name, your child's name. I'm requesting my child to be educated for these reasons. This is what I'm seeing. Sign it, give a copy to you,
Yep.
give a copy to them. I would email them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would email them and bring a copy and hand that strictly to the secretary for the principal.
Now, I want to also say that they must go through the process in the school
Right.
to be evaluated, meaning
That's a good
assessments
question.
and qualified individuals will evaluate the student. Um, but usually, typically, a school will not deny it
Hmm.
because you don't want to request evaluation and they deny it. And then you get a private one and find out there is a disability. Well, the school will
Right.
owe you
Yes.
services. So the school won't deny that. They want to go
Hmm.
forth with good fidelity and go ahead and evaluate the student. But
So,
there is a possibility that the student can get denied
hmm,
because
Hmm.
I don't want to put it out there as if, just because you feel like it, there's something. But typically they refer it for 504 services, which we'll go into later
yes.
on in this
Hmm.
presentation.
So there's a question I want to lift up for Marquita Lyles. Hey, Marquita. She said that she found that IEP only gives a student more time to complete an assignment. Are we entitled to more within that? Who?
Absolutely.
Yes.
You're entitled
Yeah.
to a lot more
Yes.
accommodations. Remember, it is
Yes.
individualized.
Yeah.
Everybody on
Yes.
IEP is going to get extended time. But what your child needs, the
Based on his
seating,
diagnosis.
uh, oral reading of the test questions,
That was
Hmm.
one
um,
thing that
repeated
Elijah didn't
directions.
get.
Right.
Daughter. There she go.
Modifications to the
Hmm.
assignment. Now there's accommodation as well as modifications, but you have accommodations. Give my child a study guide.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
chunk the work. Don't overwhelm
Yep.
my student. Chunk the work, manageable work. This list goes on and on. And this is
So
why you need to be present at those meetings, because
Yes.
before they lock that document, you should have your input on what you want the child to have. And if it's a reasonable, which usually are, pertaining to each child's disability, they have to agree as a committee and give it to you. Do not let
Yeah.
them go through that accommodation. Tell them what they're going to give you. No, you say what we're going to give the student.
Right.
You work
so we
within
are
the IEP.
gonna we have a whole part, Marquita, keep tuning in because we have a whole section strictly on accommodations and modifications, because the question that you lifted is so important,
Right.
because we do
Mhm.
think that it's just extended time when there is a laundry list of things, and even if you
Absolutely.
don't see it on the accommodations and modifications, you can request it.
Yes.
So there's a
Mhm.
laundry list of things that you can request for your child to help them, but if you're not aware of that,
Yes.
sometimes you'll get just like extended time.
Right.
Small group instruction, yes, Candace.
Yes.
I've even politicked for a special desk for
Yeah.
my son.
Yeah.
You definitely
So
can.
Elijah, one of the
You
things
can
that
have a whole
Elijah
carol.
had, yeah, one of the things that he
Mhm.
early, and I want to say like first grade, his thing was rocking. He would rock, and it became a distraction. So what do? We called a meeting. I said, well, is there something that he could sit on to where it
That's right.
rocks for him? And then he's not so worried about rocking because his chair is already
Mhm.
rocking. And that was one of the things that they were able to do in his classroom.
yeah,
Mhm.
so stay tuned for that, because there's
Hmm.
a laundry list of things, and it is really important for parents to understand the difference between accommodations and modifications. So we can go on to the next slide. Um, so once eligibility is decided, this is important, y'all. I need y'all to
That's it.
understand this. Once eligibility is decided for an IEP, you have to fall in within 13 categories. Those
Mhm.
13 categories, what you're seeing right there, is what your child would fall into in order to receive services under an IEP. Um,
Right.
the reason why this is important is because once you find out that your child is being evaluated, you need to look these up.
Right.
Look these
Mhm.
up. You need to
Mhm.
be aware of these when you get to the meeting. You need to know the difference between what autism is, blindness, deafness. All of that is kind of self-explanatory.
Mhm.
Developmental delay,
Emotional
emotional
disturbance.
disturbance,
Mhm.
intellectual disability, multiple. You need to know the difference between these, because, and I'm gonna kick this to Andrea, but if you don't know the difference between these diagnoses, your child can go, should you be given a diagnosis? You should be given a diagnosis, but you always have the ability to say, that is not
Not
my son, or that is not my daughter. I don't agree with this diagnosis.
right.
Because if you are not careful with not understanding what all of these different things your child could qualify under, they will get diagnosed sometimes. And it's not always nefarious. It may just be that they are misdiagnosed because they don't have the information you have to
Right.
bring to the table. And they'll get diagnosed for something like specific learning disability, and the whole time it's autism.
And the whole time is autism.
Or something like, you know, um, a specific learning disability and it's emotional. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So you have to know these and understand what these are so that you have an understanding of what to bring to that table. I
Exactly.
cannot stress that enough. I'm a whole principal and went through the process like you, and I'm gonna kick it over to you. Went
I
through the
wanted to
whole
say
thing.
something real quick
Yeah. Oh, go
before
ahead.
we go. So I want to make sure it's clear what the IEP team does. We identify. We don't give diagnosis.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because I don't want people to be misguided. Um, a psychologist, psychiatrist,
Yeah.
MD will give a diagnosis, but the IEP team, they identify the eligibility category. So it's not necessarily that we're going to diagnose. We're given the eligibility category, because sometimes that can be litigations if we say
This is true.
diagnose. I just want to be clear on that. I want to, I'm trying to keep my
No,
job.
Yeah.
that's important. No, that's important. But yeah, but the
Yeah.
thing, like, so they saw my son, went through the whole process, and they gave the eligibility category as he was ADHD. Absolutely
Yes.
wasn't true.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna kick that over
Yeah.
to Andrea because she also understands that as well.
When, like I said, when we first started the process of getting a diagnosis, it was he has ADHD. Here's some medicine. He'll be fine.
Mhm.
And we know from talking to the teachers prior to getting, that first referral, that it was more than just he can't sit still or he can't pay attention. He couldn't understand what the material was that he was learning in school. He didn't understand it. He didn't communicate well. So when we told the doctor, like, we need to go and get a second opinion, and like I said, that's when we went up to Cleveland, and they did so many tests with him. And about maybe 3-4 weeks later, we got our diagnosis. Then we were able to go back to the school and say, this is what we got. This is his diagnosis, and then that started the process going of the IEP. So we did get an outside referral, and then brought that diagnosis back to the school, and then said, okay. Then the school said, okay, well, now we can sit down and come up with an IEP for him.
Hmm.
But his initial diagnosis was ADHD, and we just knew that no, it has to be something more.
And so this is the thing: ADHD displays in a lot of different areas. Um, a lot of different areas.
Hmm.
So you could be autistic and still display ADHD. You could have a specific learning disability and still display ADHD.
Exactly.
ADHD displays in a lot of areas, but I think what we're just trying to say is that you just need to be thorough and make sure, because let me tell you, there are different resources available for autism
Yep.
that are not available for, let's say, specific learning disability, or there's specific strategies for emotional disturbance
Right.
that aren't necessarily going to be offered if your child is diagnosed with I don't know, one of the others. So just be mindful of all of those different things and be prepared at your IEP meeting. Okay.
Yes. ADHD is often, too often,
Too often.
labeled for our Black children. Speaking as Terry West, not the educator, um, there's cultural incompetency when it comes to ADHD. That label. Um,
Okay.
Black people, we just hype. We a natural culture that's hyped about everything.
Yeah.
Right.
And our kids go to school like that, and they hype. Even when we speak as adults, I mean, we use our hands. We're very
Right.
Yeah.
animated. Um, and some people who are teaching their children may have never even spoke or even been around a Black person in their life. And often, unfortunate,
Uh-oh.
you have teachers who lack the competency to understand that that's a culture thing. The way they act and carry themselves, they're hype. They tell
Hmm.
a joke, they laugh,
We
they
having a little
smile,
bit
and
of difficulty.
we go to school. Uh-oh, am I messing up?
It's lagging a little bit. I think they're
Am I
trying to
back?
fix it. I think you back. So go ahead. You can finish up
Okay, I'm
that.
back.
Uh-huh.
I'm saying culturally, they like to label that ADHD on African American children, and you have to fight that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is misrepresentation, lack of cultural understanding. You
Yes.
have people who see a Black kid automatically, so they're hyper. Well, that's not the case. We have disabilities,
Yeah.
or we have very intelligent, bright students. But sometimes people are placed in positions that don't necessarily do right by us. And that's a whole different topic. So I'm not going to get deep on that, but my dissertation is definitely hitting on all that. I'm gonna let y'all read it when I finish. But
Yes.
um, these boys and girls are intelligent, but that identifying them, mislabeling them, it goes through with them throughout life. And then they
Yes.
lack the confidence and that leads to other things.
Yes.
But you fight for your child because that ADHD is just a natural thing. It's like you get one, you get one, you get one. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
autism may actually it may look different on Black kids than other kids, so they don't
Yes.
know how to approach it
I learned
necessarily.
that.
So you fight and you advocate for your children. See, I'm preaching now. I don't want to do this, but
No,
I
go
am
ahead,
a very
preach.
I am very much passionate about Black, specifically Black students with disabilities, and how they fall through cracks and may
Yes.
not necessarily be properly served because lack of culture, don't want to understand them, don't feel the need to understand them, and put them in a statistic automatically. So I'm fighting for our children daily because of this. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little carried away
Oh
here.
no. Fight the good fight. No, you're
But
absolutely
the
right.
ADHD, you have them when they do these evaluation, you make sure that you are equally putting in your input as a parent.
As a parent.
You make sure you're giving them childhood background experiences, everything.
Yes.
You make sure that they're doing. You want to know what kind of assessments are you using on my child.
Hmm.
What are you want to know all of this as a parent? You get involved. You are entitled just as much as them. You get involved because your dad is actually the most important too as well. Beyond
Right.
assessments given in school, what you observe as a parent, how they're
Right.
doing on the weekend, you tell them that so they can properly identify your student.
100%. So she already hit the nail on the head with that ADHD diagnosis. And again, urban education is a social justice issue.
Mm-hmm.
Try as you might, like we say all the time, high five for your intent, but that does not mean that you have the cultural capacity to deal with
Right.
black students.
That's right.
So
And just
yeah.
to piggyback off of what you said, as a parent, don't be intimidated
Hmm.
That's
to
right.
to tell that doctor, you know, I believe I need a second opinion.
Hmm.
Don't be
That's right.
intimidated by that school professional. I think we
That's
need a
right.
second opinion.
Right.
Don't be intimidated because at the end of the day, you are your child's biggest advocate.
Right.
Absolutely.
We have a question. When should kids be tested for the autism, especially when a 2-year-old has behaviors on the autism spectrum? I'm just gonna be honest. I do not know. I wish Rachel was here, but I am not the most versed on pre-K testing. Most of my understanding comes from the IEP process in elementary and high school. I'm not
Um,
sure.
I can tell
Now
you,
they have a place.
um, 2 years old is around the time. Because
Mm-hmm.
I did a couple of conferences in Cleveland for the Milestones Autism Conference. And one of the sessions that we sat in on talked about how African American children are diagnosed way later
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
than their white
wow.
peers. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
Like
It's because.
example,
I'm sorry.
Elijah was diagnosed at 7,
Wow.
but
Oh.
there are, typically white peers are diagnosed at like 2, 3, 4.
Hmm.
So that was a big gap. That was a
Mm-hmm.
big gap. That was one of the disparities that they talked about in one of the sessions that we had.
Wow.
So if you see that your child is exhibiting mannerisms and things that you think are on the spectrum, tell your pediatrician
Mm-hmm.
because there are certain things that a 2-year-old should be doing.
Right.
And
Motor
if motor
skills.
skills, and if your child is not doing that, that was one of the things as far as what Elijah not speaking clearly.
Right.
He would just repeat
Mm-hmm.
after me. I would say, "You want some juice?" He'll say, "Juice."
Mm-hmm.
No, he at that age he should have been, saying, "I would like some juice" or "I want juice," but
Right.
he would just repeat after what I said.
Right.
So that was one of the things, and hand flapping and
Rocking.
rocking. So as soon as if you feel that your child is exhibiting, the symptoms of what autism is, talk to your pediatrician.
And don't
Yes.
take it personal.
Yes,
Don't take it.
Right.
You ain't.
Yes.
It's not. You didn't do anything wrong. It just happens. Do
No.
not take it
right.
personal. Do not be scared to go
Right.
get them diagnosed. Quick. My son was diagnosed like in first grade too.
Hmm.
Um, didn't take it personal. Just have to do what we got to do. Was delayed in speaking. Communication is a telltale.
Yeah,
Delayed in speaking, honey. He is brilliant
yeah,
in math.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant in
yeah.
math.
Mm-hmm.
With a whole autism diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So do not be afraid to get that because the sooner you get it, the sooner you can start getting that support.
Exactly.
Yep.
I was going to say, going back to culture with Black parents, um, how many of us can remember? It's a stigma with us, slap on our hands, but sometimes we see things and we feel like, oh, they'll grow out of it. um, we accept things and we kind of overlook things as a culture,
Mm-hmm.
because we think, oh, they'll grow out of it, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
he just a little slow, he okay. We I ain't taking him to no doctor, he fine, he'll be just fine. He just shy. We have to come
Mm-hmm.
out of that. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
as soon
That
as
was
you
me.
see something, if you feel like your baby is not walking the
Right.
Right.
delay, this all goes back to brain.
Right.
If you see a delay, they have early evaluations for kids that are as young as 2 and younger. So immediately
Right.
stop.
That is
Listen, we got
true.
to break the stigma in the Black community about getting our child evaluated.
Yeah.
We have a
Right.
stigma sometimes because I know growing up, you see kids, but oh, he just a little delay, he'll grow out of it. Oh, he
Mm-hmm.
just acting silly, he's just simple minded, and it's not. It's a whole disability that we're not receiving services because sometimes our own ignorance, I hate to say that,
No, it's true.
prevents us from
Mm-hmm.
doing that. We are in denial with this. So I wanted to add on to that.
And I'm gonna have to be an auntie. Real quick, I'm gonna take Principal Leah hat off, and I don't even know if this is auntie hat, but this more might be more like social activist. I don't know what this is, Leah, but um, this is not to hurt. This is not to hurt anybody's feelings, but this is just to keep it completely real and not be the person to judge. This is not a judgment call, but
Absolutely.
there, when we deal in urban education, um, a lot of times we are dealing with people who have a lot of trauma
Yes.
associated with poverty, associated with all of these different things that happen through circumstances. That is urban education. We just got to call that what it is. Like when you're dealing in urban education, you are dealing with a lot of things that sneak their way into the system. That impedes education. So I'm trying to put this delicately. We have to be honest with ourselves about what it is that we are taking our kids through at home.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
if you know, this is not a judgment call because nobody is perfect.
Correct.
However, nobody's situation is perfect. We are in a church right now, so but God, you can come out of it. You can come right on out of it. However, if you are in it, your children are
Are
in
in
it
it.
with you.
Yep.
Your
Exactly.
children in it with you.
Exactly.
So
That's the
you don't have
word.
to tell nobody about that. You don't. I mean, you should go get counseling. You should go ahead and try and get yourself out of that. But you have to be really honest about what it is you going through and what your children are seeing and what your children are going through, because that diagnosis of emotional disturbance, a lot of
Mhm.
times that diagnosis of emotional disturbance has to do with trauma.
Yes.
And we think
Trauma.
that our kids are resilient, and they are, but that trauma manifests in ways that we do not give credence to a lot of times.
Exactly.
So be really conscious about what your child is seeing, and don't just think because you saw it when you was young and you turned out okay.
Yeah.
You probably need to go to counseling
Yeah.
too. You just
Yeah.
ain't been yet.
Right.
Or
Right.
just
Right.
because you
Mhm.
think that they okay with playing that game while you and they your husband is in there fighting, or you think they okay because
They
they saw their
internalize
dad
it.
go to jail.
Right.
Daddy was here, now he in jail. You think they okay because you know you think they okay, and this you can't be in your own way to feel like somebody gonna judge you. Do what's best for your kid.
Exactly.
So if you know
That's
your
right.
child is going through stuff like that, get your child help and really think through what that, because a lot of times we see these kids getting suspended, acting out, cussing
Right.
out teachers,
Right.
doing like
Right.
all of these little
Mhm.
things that they doing in school, having complete fit running
Right.
in elementary school, take off
Yeah.
running, all these things that we see these kids doing, a lot of times may be trauma informed and they need
Mhm.
help.
Yeah.
They need,
So
and
yeah.
and that could be both internal and external that they show it. They can literally shut down on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
totally depressed, and it impedes their ability to focus in school. How can I focus
Right.
in school?
Yes.
I'm trying to kill myself. I'm trying to find a way to kill myself. This
Yeah.
is what's going on with these babies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, External, all you see is them acting up, throwing something. They might be aggressive. Okay, you see that, but some of the internal things are going under. These kids are suffering with these emotional issues. Even with this whole pandemic, These kids are
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's usually coming from home, something that's stimulated, things that happen that they experience as a child, and how they express themselves, unfortunately, is through behavior and their emotions, and it's not always appropriate. But I will also say kids who are diagnosed with EBD, you really have to work with them because that's your population.
Right.
Although it seems that all kids, all Black kids are trained, they're groomed for prison basically, if you're not giving them the right kind of help. They are like 30% higher, I don't know my stats correctly, um, to go off to prison if they're not properly served. Because all
Right.
they're going to do is keep suspending them. And no, intervention needs to be in place with that BIP and everything,
Yes.
Yes.
Intervention. Yep.
to meet this child's not just educational needs, but behavioral needs
Yes.
as
And
well,
that is
social
also a point.
emotional needs. The
Yes.
social
That is a
emotional
big.
needs. hmm
Yeah, go ahead. No.
we need to address the social emotional needs that sometimes the IEP just not going to cover. So interventions need to be placed beyond the IEP with the behavior
Exactly.
intervention plan as well.
Yes, very important. So yes, take that to heart, y'all. Next we gonna go on to the next in the interest of time.
I'm sorry.
Um, oh no, no, no. I mean, all of this is good information, though. So I'm not gonna, we not gonna belabor this, but if a child is found eligible for services, say they say, "Yep, we see
hmm
something, we see you eligible for services," they have 30 days after they're determined eligible to get with you and write that IEP. So what I'm going to tell parents is you have 30 days to educate yourself on these diagnoses
Yes.
that
Yes.
that you need to come to this IEP meeting and be prepared to talk about, right?
hmm
30 days to kind of monitor your child, and even if you got to take a notebook, start writing different things down you see about your child. So yes, 30 days. We can go on to the next slide. Um, IEP meeting is scheduled. Um, Yep. Contact, notify parent. So they have to notify you early enough to make sure you have an opportunity to attend. They can't tell you the day
Right.
before and
No,
tell
they
you to come
cannot.
on
Right.
in next Tuesday and do this IEP.
I know
Go
Yes.
what
ahead.
Warren City. What we did was, once he was determined that he qualified for an IEP, um, they sent a letter home with him, maybe about 2.5 weeks before the meeting, and on that letter, parents, make sure if you do get this letter, respond to the letter.
Yes.
hmm
They gave all kind of, if you can't make it in person, we can do a phone. If you couldn't do a phone, you could do like a video conference. Um, but respond to the letter. Um, let's see, Andrea, your son. What impact has been made from age 7? Oh, Elijah's brilliant. Elijah is he is one of a kind. He will tell you in the most polite way no, um, and mean it. But as far as with the IEP, parents, once that meeting is set up, you have the right to get a copy of the IEP before the meeting. Get a copy before the meeting. That is your right to look over it because the IEP, well, for us, our IEP was about 15 pages,
Hmm.
fully stocked, words, boxes. I
hmm
had no idea what an IEP was until I got to that first meeting. And once I educated myself, that meeting became very, very successful. The first couple of times, I'm not gonna
hmm
lie, it was tough, it was difficult, it was intimidating. I felt that everything wrong my child could do, they were letting me know. But after I became educated on how the IEP process works, then, like I said, those meetings became very successful and very helpful. And I was able to help and share my information with a lot of other parents that would ask.
All right.
Can I
So,
piggyback
oh,
up, Andrea?
you can absolutely.
Yeah. So I just because what she said, the first couple of times she probably wasn't as confident. And
Right.
she probably was a little intimidated because they throwing all this stuff. Let me just say the process, you need to get adequate notice. And if you can't make it, then they need to reschedule. They should
Yes.
give you about 3 or 4 chances. They should show good intent in your
Yep.
participation, because participation with the parent is key. Okay. The IEP, if they give you an IEP before the meeting, understand that is a draft. That is not the
Yes.
final document. That is not
Right.
legal for that to be the final document. Because when you
Right.
come up in there and if you see something you want to change, first of all and foremost, I don't know if everybody practices, but legally, the IEP should be completed at the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You go in together, everybody goes in and they create this document. But sometimes, for the time's sake, they can give you a draft and you can
Right.
review it and say if you agree or disagree or what you want to put. Your input is very needed. It is needed.
Yes.
Those accommodations, all of that. None of that is final until you all meet, because every decision is an IEP committee decision,
Yep.
not just the teachers and the administrator.
Exactly.
That's not legal. Your input, and you must consent to it. Um, Something else I was going to say, but I wanted to just piggyback on that point she had made, that when she came in, they gave her a document before the meeting.
Yeah.
That is just a draft. That is not the final IEP. That is not the end all be all. You have your
Right.
rights. First of all, they should also, with the written notice, they should also give your parent rights. You should always be given a
Mm.
copy of
Yeah.
your parent rights with a child with disabilities. So you know exactly what to look for when you come in there, and what you're entitled to as a parent.
Right.
So every
So we.
time you know your, and if you don't understand your rights, it is their job to explain and go in detail
Mm.
and explain it to you.
Exactly.
You should not be intimidated, because remember, the IEP is an educational plan for the progress of the child. It is basically a legal document that the school, between you and the school, that is basically saying the school is going to honor this, and this is what the services the school is promising to give to your child.
Right.
Right.
That
And
IEP is not just for that school. If you leave that school, the IEP goes with that child.
goes
Goes
with
with you.
you. Yes.
Yep.
It goes
Which is
right
why
with
it's
you.
never too late.
Yes.
Never too
Which is
late.
why, yeah, it's never too late. Your son a senior, and you just now noticing something. It goes
Mhm.
that you can get accommodations in college.
Yes, you
Your
can.
child,
That's right.
12 years old now, going to high school. It is not too late. So yes,
Never,
the yeah.
never too
So
late.
never too late. So go ahead, to the next slide, please, and thank you. Um, we already kind of talked about this. So there is one thing I do want to touch on. You both, I'm sure, probably have experience in this. We're going to talk about that later, so we can actually skip over this because we have a whole section on nothing but accommodations and modifications. So after the IEP is written, services are provided. So there is something to say about least restrictive environment that you need to be
Mhm.
aware of. Hi, Rachel. Rachel said yes. So Rachel is here too. So I'm probably gonna kick some pre-K stuff to her because she works with pre-K, special ed. But least restrictive environment is important because a lot of times they have like these single classrooms where they when we were young it was really that's just what they
Yeah.
did. you
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
you didn't
Mhm.
learn or whatever. They put all of everybody who they felt was issues in one classroom,
Yes.
and that was
And
it.
that was it.
So
I was
sometimes that still
thinking,
happens. And we you have
Yeah.
to be careful because there is something called least restrictive environment. That means that they
mhm.
have to be in an environment that is the most, I guess, that creates the most sense of normalcy with kids
Right,
who are, neurotypical, who do not have
Mm-hmm.
disabilities, so that everybody can
right.
learn off of everybody,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Yes.
we can go
It's the
we can
least
go to the next.
restrictive is the general ed setting. The least
Yes.
restrictive learning environment, the LRE is what they'll say, the acronyms. That would be your general ed setting. Okay. That would be the first one. Then if that wouldn't be successful, it'd be like co-taught, small group, special ed school. It's a whole level to it, but it's best practice. The goal is to always put the student in the least restrictive learning environment with their non-disabled peers.
Yes.
Right. Um, I know Rachel is here. Is that the same? Just a question. Is that the same for pre-K? Exact same. Okay. So she's saying it's the exact same thing with pre-K. Okay. So we can go on to the next slide. Progress is measured and reported to the parents. Very important because if you are not getting a progress report, not a progress not a progress report as far as like the
Right.
regular progress report from your teacher with their grades. You should have a additional progress report that outlines
Mhm.
how your child is doing on their IEP,
Right.
and that should come out
Right.
as much as any progress reporting for their grades or more.
Yeah.
It's,
So if you
it's
are not getting a
determined.
progress report, your school is out of compliance.
It should be given out. That should be determined in the IEP meeting when you will get that. So typically, it's every grading period with the report card. It should go
Yep.
out, and it is focused on the IEP specific goals, the objectives, as well as the goal. And you're seeing if your child is making progress towards that
Progress.
goal. And if
Right.
not, then it should document that, and a meeting should be held to address if the
Hmm.
child is not meeting or regressing. So
Right.
make sure
Uh,
you should get that along with your report cards. Typically, it's a report card, but I guess it's based on the school.
right. Because why go a whole year doing something that
Does
does
not
not
work.
work? So yeah, so you should be
Absolutely,
getting a IEP progress report. Okay. So next
absolutely.
slide. IEP is reviewed once a year, at least once a year. So I'm not going to read that verbatim, but Andrea, if you are not happy or if something happens within that, so it's reviewed by IEP team at least once a year, but it's on a 3-year loop as far as redoing it.
Right.
But if you are unhappy or you think something needs revised, have you ever been through the process or of saying we are not within our calendar year and that we're not set to redo this IEP, but I need to call an IEP meeting?
Well, the IEP meeting, like you said, it loops every 3 years, but every year we do meet with the education
Right.
team, education review team, the
Mhm.
ERT, or one of the acronyms, where we go through and say, they'll ask us, well, how do you think he's doing? Is there anything that we need to add to his IEP? Now, like I said, that comes from years of having these meetings, and so I formed a bond with the special education teacher, the special education district. Just that came from building those bonds. But no, there was never a time that I felt that we needed to change. But if I had any questions, I could call a meeting,
Mhm.
and they would schedule the meeting within 30 days.
Right.
And then we would have the meeting to discuss. For instance, once Elijah got up into high school,
Mhm.
and one of the things that we did was we started bringing Elijah into his own IEP meetings and his own educational team review meetings, because to us it made no sense to talk about him as if he did not have a
Oh
voice.
no, that's right.
And so then once, like I said, once he got up into high school, he became telling them what his goals were.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so then the IEP was then accustomed to not us speaking for him, but him having a voice and knowing that we're having these meetings.
Right.
And once, like I said, once we got up into high school, that became his meeting,
Mhm.
and he sat at the head of the table.
Mhm.
That's
So
right.
That's awesome.
once, like I said, once we got into high school, then okay, well, maybe we should change this. Or, Elijah, do you feel this is a goal for you? Do you think you can attain this goal? What do you feel you need to work on?
Mhm.
And he was able to tell everyone at that table what he wanted to do.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. Bringing your child into the IEP meetings with you once they become of age. I thought
Hmm.
that was really good tidbit.
I was gonna, when they are of age 14, they're legally supposed to be invited to the IEP meeting.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It's best practice to invite them, and you did a wonderful job in making your son come, or because it is his meeting.
Yeah,
And then when they're 17, it actually should be documented in the meeting that this will be transferred over. The rights will be transferred over to the child, because once they turn 18, that is there. They make
exactly.
decisions without parents. They can make decisions.
Exactly.
I also want everyone to know that an IEP is good for 1 year minus 1 day. So, for instance, today is February 5th. The IEP is good until February 4th of 2023. So keep that in mind. You can always revise, amend the IEP, add or take away from the IEP.
Mhm.
if it needed. But it can't just be mom makes a decision or teacher makes a decision. The IEP committee has to agree on the
Right.
change.
Right.
It's a
Right.
decision. It's a committee decision.
Right. And I've had to do that a couple times within Marvis's school career where I had to come in and say, hey, I want to gather the team in because I'm noticing A, B, and C. And
Right.
it's a process, but if you see something, speak up, and you can actually call that IEP back to the carpet to kind of revise it. But again, this is all about making sure you get what you need. So we are going
That's
to,
right.
again, there's something down there to say type your questions in. I think we've been kind of filtering them thus far. But if you have questions on the IEP process, because we're done with that section, that's just the process that you can expect when going through the IEP. We are going to move into a super important, the ultimately important modifications versus accommodations, because you can get an IEP, but what are they doing with your child?
Right. Right. Right.
Yes, we got an IEP, but what does that mean, right? Yay, my child has an
Mhm.
IEP.
Now what?
Now what? What's the plan?
Mhm.
So an accommodation versus a modification. So an accommodation is a change that helps the student work around their disability. So it's something that they'll do to help your student when they have a disability work around it. A modification is something that they are doing to the work. Am I saying that in layman's terms, Terry?
You are. Yes.
Okay. Yes. So we're going to dive into that because that's really important when you are talking about advocating for your child. Like we said, like I think Marquita brought up, well, they only give my child extra time. That is basic. That's basic. There's so much more you can be getting for your child depending on what you see or what you think your child needs. So let's get into accommodations versus modifications. You can go to the next slide. I'm sorry. So I'm not gonna go through all of this. I'm probably just gonna kick it to you guys. So let's just have a conversation around some different accommodations. Let's just start with accommodations that we can have. What you're seeing up on the screen is just a couple of examples. So it really depends on like what is wrong or what you're seeing with your child. So if the barrier may be that they're not understanding the way that things are said to them, you can get books with large prints. You can get visual cues. You can get audio books. And don't shoot audiobooks like that's making your child dumb either, because they're still processing, synthesizing it
Yes.
Right.
while they're listening to it. So
Yes, they
you can get audiobooks, you can get closed caption. Oh, trick too for all the parents. When your child is young, just throw them closed captions on the bottom of the screen. That's a really good, easy way to help inspire
Yes, it
reading
does.
at a
Right.
young age. Just if you're watching TV and you have a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, throw on the closed captions,
I never
right?
thought of that.
Yeah,
That's a good
Good
one.
yeah, throw on
strategy.
the closed captions.
I was
Rachel said, just don't turn on the TV. Just read your child a book. Read your
absolutely. She's
children
right.
books.
Read the book.
Black
Yeah.
boys read. I'm going
Yeah.
to plug you, Pastor Todd.
Mhm.
Plugging Pastor Todd, Black boys read. Read your children books, turn off the TV.
Yes.
So these are accommodations. So let's just have a conversation about accommodations, Terri and Andrea. What are some
Okay.
examples of
Okay.
some accommodations as it relates to some of these disabilities that you guys have seen?
For Elijah, he had not the strongest penmanship in second, third grade. We were able to have a scribe.
What's that?
A scribe it was like a teacher's aide that would come in and read to Elijah the questions, and whatever his answers were, they wrote it down because he couldn't write it down on the worksheet.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So that was one of the big ones that we had was a scribe.
So, quick thing about that too. In my master's, no, this wasn't even the master's. This was the PhD I never finished. Literally, the PhD program that I was in that I never finished.
Now you didn't have to say that part.
You laughing, Terri? I couldn't do it. So I will again once. But in any case,
Okay.
because those accommodations follow you,
Mhm.
I had a young lady in my PhD program who had a scribe, and
Yep.
she had a person who came with her, and they wrote
The
down her
notes.
notes.
Yep.
Yep. So these
Mhm.
things follow you. So yep. So so think about how many of y'all ever thought of I can get a scribe for my child. I can get a
Right.
scribe for my child in school. Terry, what are your thoughts on that?
So this is what I'm going to say. We're going back to that picture we had about equality and equity. This is where that plays. This is where it makes it different. And how I say it is education is not a one size fits all thing. It is not for it's same plan is not for everyone. Okay. Um, I say like you give everybody a pair of shoes, but I wear a size 10, he wears a size 7, she wears a size 5. Just because you gave us all shoes doesn't mean it's
Right.
appropriate for me. So I'm gonna need something to accommodate my needs. So you have students modifications for my needs. You can get a one-on-one paraprofessional for kids with behavior issues. Maybe
Yep.
they need a pair to walk with in the class, so they're not doing anything in the hallway.
So
Um,
real quick on that, y'all listen. You can advocate for that. That
Mhm.
pays dividends.
Yeah.
So if your child is constantly getting suspended, constantly needing redirected, no teacher on planet Earth has time to continually redirect and on the level that sometimes some of our students need. Like I've seen students where literally you redirect them once, and it's not that they're being,
Defiant.
they're not being
Yeah.
define
defiant.
or
They
anything.
mind jumps that quick.
Quick to go
I
back.
live with one.
Mhm.
To
Who
go-
child I live with
yeah.
one.
Mhm.
His mind jumps so quick. It's constant saying the same thing over and over again. That's not being defiant. That's just because their brain works
Different, yeah.
fast. It works
Fast.
very different.
Mhm.
But if you do not know that you can actually ask for somebody to sit with him
Mhm.
in class, and be that person to constantly remind him. So that is something that you can literally ask for in an IEP that you may not even know.
Absolutely. When you go into the IEP meeting, there will be there's different components of the IEP, and this will be under, I believe, considerations for and then services. And you
Yes.
should have a whole list that's given, and they should go down the list, and you should agree as a committee which ones would be right for your student.
Yep.
Uh, for instance, the
Say that
typical one,
again, Terry, because I don't think that happens in all
It
IEP
does not.
meetings. It does not
yeah,
happen in all
they
IEP meetings.
they need to pull up the options. It should be projected for you to see
Oh,
the options, and they should review each one with you. And you as a team, you decide what is right for your
That did
student.
not happen.
They didn't have. Oh, well,
That it
they
did
should
not. It
decide.
did not.
Yes, it should be a list projected, and you will decide what would be right. And it's different kind of accommodation. There are testing accommodations and
Right.
classroom accommodations. So whenever a child take an assessment, typically, like for instance, if they take a state exam, you may request that
Mhm.
they're put into a small group setting and they receive
Mhm.
extended time. Even headphones where they read the questions. They're not going to read to them unless the data shows that there is a reading deficit, meaning they can't decode words. The system will read to them. Um, you also have things like repeat the directions. If your child has a behavior issues, give him a break. So you get breaks.
yes,
We're taking a test.
Yes.
They get a break
yes.
not to exceed 5 minutes.
Hmm.
They can get up, maybe walk around. Somebody monitor them as they walk around and stretch, but they get that.
Yeah.
They
Hmm.
get that. So these accommodations, they are to aid, where there's a weakness, help the student be on the same playing field as the others. Equality, provide equity to the student. That's where that comes back and play on that. But they should, best practice is to see it and you go over it. Um, and they can disagree. It's a recommendation. They can disagree on it, but typically you don't want to see that because a disagreement goes beyond and due process and all that stuff. But typically the team they see is reasonable. They agree on it,
Right.
and they're all
Right.
reasonable. The one
So
with the pair, if you get like an assistant, now that would be data has to support that.
Oh, okay.
For that paraprofessional, that extra person to be with your son or daughter. But it's reasonable. You should definitely make that decision at the IEP meeting.
So the takeaway is, because we don't have time to go through all the different accommodations that you could have, it is very
Mhm.
reasonable and very encouraged to ask the people to ask your IEP team to say, can I get a list
List of
of the accommodations that
accommodations.
are available? You look through it
Mhm.
with them, and it's okay to say, you know what, I don't want to decide right now. I want to take this home and think about it. I want to look.
Yes.
It's not optimal. They probably, they want to get it done, especially if they up against a deadline. But at
Yes.
least you need to ask and say what accommodations are available. What are the different types of accommodations are available? I politic for my son to get a different desk. I politic for my
Mhm.
son to get breaks. So when she talked about breaks, he had a break after lunch for like 10 minutes where he can go to the gym so that he was not cutting up in
Yeah.
class.
Fidgety in class.
He
He
wasn't
got it
Mhm.
out.
fidgety in
Mhm.
class. They got wiggle
Yeah.
wiggle chairs.
Yeah.
There's all kind of
We got
different
bouncy
accommodate.
balls.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We have
there's
beanie seats where they don't have to. They can sit and be relaxed. Beanie chair.
Yes.
yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Lee. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go
I was
ahead.
going to also say this is one I always advocate for with my parents. I always say for math. 'Cause sometimes parents are like, I can't help them with math, and the student has a deficit of math. I mean, you can even get accommodations of reduced math questions to
Yes,
reduce the question for them.
right.
Um, they don't know this because they sometimes they go to the IEP meeting, it's whatever they say goes, and you're like, okay,
Right,
where I
Yes.
sign.
Yeah.
No, you have a
Yeah.
voice.
right.
This is
I learned
you
that.
are a part of the committee. You are a part. In fact, you are driving this. You are in
Yes,
the driver's seat actually. You be
Exactly.
the voice and say this is what they need. They need study guides. They need this. You be. But I don't want to keep talking, so I know we on time, so I'm trying to just push it back to you guys.
well, that's a good segue into modification. So when you talked about, so this is the difference between accommodations and modifications. So when we're talking about accommodations, those are those things that help a student with their disabilities. Modification is like literally we are shortening the test.
Yes.
Literally we are asking, the wording in the test is going to be different
Different for
for
your
your
child.
child. So that is literally modifying the information so that your child processes it in the way that is most beneficial for your child. Your child may have dyslexia. So there is a modification for that child with dyslexia when they talk about so like modifying the test period or modifying the work period. Um, and I don't want parents to think that that means your child is not bright.
Right.
Like even when they're saying like, well, how do that make my child, like, aren't you handicapping my child to have somebody read to my child and then they answer questions? Not necessarily, because the idea is, can they critically think about what they're hearing?
Hearing.
Yes, can they read? And yes, that it's a work in progress, but even on the same page as that, reading is one thing, because you can have kids. My son was like that, could read every word in front of him, but he
Couldn't
wasn't
comprehend.
comprehending it.
Yeah.
So can he comprehend? Can he, can they do these higher level and higher order um, thinking around what these passages are saying?
Exactly.
And what you find out a lot of times is because they had to overcompensate about, they're brilliant in the way that they overcompensate. A lot of times you'll find that the students who can't read, if you talk it through with them, they have some of the brightest answers orally.
Exactly.
They have some of
Absolutely.
and that's another thing with our children. When
Yeah.
Terri brought up cultural capacity and we are oral people, period. We come from a history of
Mhm.
oral traditions. That's why we
Mhm.
love church. That's why we love preaching. We are oral people, and a lot of times we learn, African American children learn orally.
Yeah.
So there's another cultural competency in there that,
And not only that, our language is different.
yeah.
Kids
Correct.
know what they're talking about, but the language is different, what they're using in school versus what you hear at home, because our grandparents, I mean, we're not too far removed from slavery. Let's just be real. And
Mhm.
the dialect is just not always correct. So we say things that in society see as error, is not right. But that's how they learn. And the kids go to school and they talk this way. And teachers are like, they don't speak, that's not proper English, or they don't say this word correctly. Well, that's what my mama said. My mama
Yeah.
used the word worser. I'm gonna use the word worser.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
not a
Right.
word, but she said it.
Right.
correct me, but they think, okay, they don't get it, but it goes back to culture. We blacks, we are very, very, very animated, very hyped up, and it's just we do things a lot differently, and some people lack that understanding, or like I said, don't want to understand that. So they, just to say it's a disability, and a child can't. When a child can, you just
Right.
have to figure out how to meet their needs.
Right.
Y'all,
So,
y'all can see I'm passionate. I'm sorry, I'm so
oh
passionate about this
no,
subject.
no, Dr. West, we got you. We
Right.
feel you. So,
I'm
couple more
coming soon
months,
this
Dr.
summer.
West. Few more months, Dr. West. But yeah, so the takeaway from that is if you do not know what modifications and
Accommodation.
accommodations are available, ask. Again, that's one of those things. Do your homework on it before you get to the IEP meeting, because you can get so much more than extended time. Extended time is good, but you can get so much more for your child more than
Exactly.
extended time out. I think there was a question. Bria had a question. Bria had a question that I saw. It was something about who does
Do the
who suggests
parents?
the modifications
Yeah.
and accommodations.
There, it's done at the IEP meeting. That's when you
Yeah.
elaborate. All considerations have to be put on the table.
Okay.
Data to support it. If the data is there, one thing about data, it can't be changed. If it's there, there's a deficit in that area, and it's something
Mhm.
that's going to help the student accommodate their needs. The modification will accommodate and meet them at their individual educational needs. Then it's a
Mhm.
yes. You
Yep.
agree as a committee. You put it on the table.
Another thing to be careful of, and this is something that if you know, you know, which I did not know until I got into education myself, is that you can actually politic for extended time in the summer. So
Yes.
if your
That's
student has
excluded school
significant
year.
learning loss, or if there is, or
Mhm.
if it's evidence that
Absolutely.
your child has significant. Now, this may not be something that you might be able to do the first year of an IEP, because you, again, like Terri said, you have to have the data to support
Right.
that. But if
Mhm.
there is a significant decrease in his education, where he was at one level at the end of the year, and then they came back and tested him, and he had a whole,
Two levels
two
under.
levels under because
Yeah.
of summer break. There's always some learning loss with summer break,
Mhm.
but if that is significant, you can literally politic for where the
Extended
school
school year.
district will have to give you
It's
extended
called
Extended
school
school year.
year.
it's
Yeah,
called
they have to
extended
provide
school,
that.
ESY is what it is. And
Mhm.
if severe regression,
Mhm.
things can happen. Like if your child comes back, even something as small as like summer break, they come back and they regressed, and they don't retain the information like they should. Definitely, they ask you that question. And again, as a committee, every single person individually has to agree that your daughter or son either needs or require ESY or they don't. But the data, they have to mark up notes, like 4 questions should be asked. And if it's
Yep.
any one of those questions is a yes, then they will receive extended school year.
And
That is
just to
like
piggyback off of that, I was told that prior to our IEP meeting from my son's special education teacher.
Oh.
mm,
She
that
pulled
he
us to
doesn't
the
need it.
side. She pulled us to the side and she said, "Make sure you ask about extended school year."
Yay, teacher.
Yep, absolutely.
And we went, and it was crazy because when we went in there for the meeting and we asked about that, everybody was kind of like taken back.
Yeah, because how you know
How do
that?
you know about that?
He costing us money. He costing us money.
So that and that summer he ended up being eligible to do the extended school year.
Mhm.
But mind you, he was in like 5th grade. We had learned nothing about that prior to that IEP meeting.
Yep.
Mm.
So go in there informed. We can go to the next slide. I don't. Always trying to let them know. Yep. 504 plan. Just quickly, Terri, Andrea. Oh well, I don't know. Terri, I'll kick this to you. Difference between an IEP and a 504 plan.
IEP is covered under the idea EDS. Some people say EDA, we say idea. Meaning the laws of special education, meaning you have been identified as special education and that's your individualized plan. The 504 is to keep your child from being discriminated against. Something like a civil rights movement. It's an act. 504 plan is. It is basically the eligibility in the IEP, those categories. Your child has a disability that doesn't necessarily fall in that category. For instance, ADHD. That's probably number one for a 504 plan. Mental illness, any impairment physically or mentally, the child will fall underneath the 504. Often when a child is not eligible for IEP services, they didn't meet the criteria for that. They'll go into a 504 plan for them, meaning there is a disability. So we need to accommodate the student's needs. So they'll typically give you accommodations and you will meet as if it was an IEP. But the same laws are not given for a 504, but there are laws, and the school has to adhere to the 504 and accommodate the students' needs in the classroom setting.
So this would be something along the lines where I've had this situation happen in practice where it would be like a situational thing, temporary thing, and we realized that they need a 504 because they were not going to be covered under an IEP. But it could be something, this was a real story where bright young lady, parents went through a divorce, she had super anxiety and it was playing out in her classes. Mom came in and told us, brought in doctor's notes that said her anxiety is off the charts. So we had to develop a 504 plan for her. So it's really just identifying those kind of like health issues, things that may not fall under an IEP that your child can still be protected for. Yep. So
Right.
If somebody says that, we're recommending a 504 plan for your child, it's still a protection for your child. It's just by law, it doesn't fall under the categories for an IEP. It doesn't fall under the 13. Yep.
So here is the big thing. Any school or program that receives federal financial assistance, they have to basically accommodate the 504 plan as well as an IEP, but that 504, meaning they don't have an IEP, but there's a disability, so they should be discriminated against playing football or participating in this activity or this club because they have okay, they got ADHD, so what's the plan to work around the ADHD?
Right.
Despite the ADHD, what's the plan for us to see the good behaviors, to see the strengths come out?
Right.
What's the plan? So the 504 is in place to prevent any discrimination of any disability. If despite it not being covered under an IEP, it's still it's usually treated as an IEP, but it's not an IEP, if that makes sense to you all.
And and Terri brought up a good point as far as a segue, especially for our elementary parents, any elementary parents who may be watching. What's the plan? We also need to go into these meetings thinking about that the plan cannot, especially for our like behavior intervention plans or BIPs, like plans that are going to change behaviors. We need to think about like what your child responds to positively too. So those plans also need to really think about how to positively reinforce the good in your child and not just identify when they're doing something and writing it down so they can document it. Like those plans really need to encompass a reward system and a way to congratulate them for modeling what you want them to have. So that's another thing to like think of when you go into these meetings. Like, what does your child respond to? What kind of positive reinforcement does your child respond to? And I have to be honest, going through the IEP process has made me a better parent because you even when you're at home, you deal with things differerly because you learn so many tools. Like I joke about stuff all the time where they just laugh and just be like, where we see kids. My worst one, I was so mad, but it was a little boy in a barber shop and he was acting out. My whole thoughts, I was like, that boy autistic. That boy, absolutely. Did you? I seen that. Ooh, I was so mad.
You know why?
Everybody was like, oh, he need a whooping.
Elijah was like
that.
Elijah was like that.
And y'all keep touching him.
And that was before his diagnosis. So it was always a struggle to cut his hair.
Yeah.
And we had no idea. And like you said, he just don't want to get his hair cut. He don't want to sit still. No, he had autism. We didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was.
Don't touch me.
Yeah.
Like, autism
it was the
don't
sound
touch
of
me.
the clippers. It was the sound of the clippers vibrating on his head.
Yeah.
He did not like that.
Yes.
And it was just they kept trying to grab him, and then
Yeah.
the comments was like, "Oh, he need a whooping.
Yeah,
He need."
no.
You go ahead and try and whoop an autistic child
No.
if you want to,
Mhm.
and see how it is not going to benefit you
It's
or
not
your
going to do
child.
anything.
Right.
It does nothing for your child, and we cannot beat our
Nothing.
kids
Right.
into submission,
Submission.
and everything
Come
does
on.
not need a what. Listen, so we gonna
Come
talk
on,
about
culture.
that too. Listen, everything don't need a
Come on,
whooping.
culture.
Everything don't. Your child don't need a whooping for
Everything.
everything that
Right.
they do wrong.
Everything.
Sometimes you
That's-
just need to have a conversation.
Conversation.
And some of
That's
them,
a
like we talked
conversation.
about, we black. That's white people stuff. Some of that white people stuff works. Some of it works.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Counting to 10.
Beating
When
your
my
child
son
is
is
not
out,
the answer.
Right.
hitting your children all the time is not the answer, y'all. We got to
That
go
is
because
trauma.
since we own Black history, that comes from slavery. Like
Yes, it does.
we got beat on into submission, and in turn we internalize that and we beat our kids for everything. I'm not anti, popping my child every so
Right.
often or spanking them, but we have
Not
something.
everything.
It is something in our community that say that we need to whoop our kids for everything, and it's ridiculous.
It is.
So when Marvis was acting out, or when he has a meltdown, honey, I literally has to, not when he acting out because he know better. He's bigger now,
Yeah.
but when he was little, just a quick anecdote. When I first saw, I literally cried
Yeah.
because I had no idea.
What to do?
I just had no. It's like he blanked out, and he was knocking stuff off my. He was out of there, but literally, I learned that I had to ground him, count him down, and calm him down, and that's what works. So sometimes a lot of these things that you go through in the IEP process, bring them into your home.
Exactly.
Bring them into
That's
your
right.
home. It really made me a better person, and we gotta stop beating our kids for everything.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
That's right.
going back to when Elijah was first diagnosed, we did do, because there's no pill that you can take to stop the traits of autism. It's
Right.
you live with autism. Autism does not have him; he has control over it. But when we first got his diagnosis, we did do the medication. But what we noticed with his medication is, yes, he would sit still in school, but he wasn't learning. It's like he wasn't there. He just spaced out. And when he came home, all of that built up energy was released at home. And we like, what is wrong with this boy? And then we noticed he started being mean to his sister. And we were like, you know what? We got to take him off this medication. And we switched meds twice. Different amounts. And then finally, around Elijah was 8, he hasn't taken any kind of medication, up until now, 19. So from the ages of 8 to 19, like you said, we had to learn some of those different techniques on how to, I remember times bringing him to work with me in the morning, just because I knew if I dropped him off at school, it wasn't going to be a good day.
Yep.
So you're going to come to the office with me. We're going to sit and chill. We're going to grab a little breakfast. And then when I feel, and you're able to tell me, are you ready to go back to school? He'll say yes. And this was like 5th, 6th grade. But like you said, understanding those tools to help your child. I knew if I dropped them off, I was just going to go back and pick them up because they was going to call me. But just learning that, and like I said, the fact that we've been able to deal with all the different traits without any kind of medication. Now, don't get me wrong, medication works for some. We noticed it did not work for Elijah.
Right.
But yeah, it would, child, if I dropped them off, y'all gonna call me in about 20 minutes to come back and get them. So,
Honey, they turned the whole bus around for my son one time.
yeah, so,
Turned the whole bus around. I got a call. They said, "Man, we had to take the bus back to the school." I said, "Lord, have mercy."
here I come.
Okay. Here I come.
Way.
So my son's he's not a bad kid.
Right.
He and anybody who taught the Marvis now, y'all, he is an absolutely amazingly bright, wonderful young man. You probably wouldn't even know what we done went through to get him to where he is now. So yes, keep up the good fight, y'all. What's the next slide? And what time is it? Because I want to be cautious of time. Oh, we got about 30 minutes. We should definitely get through this. If you can write this down, or even if you just Google ODE, students with disabilities, Ohio Department of Education, student with disabilities. Read through this website and this area thoroughly. This will really help you prepare for the special ed. I mean the IEP meeting, and this is what we talked about up until this point. Just informing yourself of all of these things up until this point. So we can go ahead on to the next slide. So, what happens if you guys are denied an IEP or a 504? Aw. Okay, so this has happened. I've had people inbox me, which is why I even did this, because people know I'm an educator, so they inbox me questions. I've had numerous people tell me that they requested an IEP meeting, and they were denied, but they honestly feel something is wrong with their child. They know in their heart something is wrong with their child. So this is just a little information about what you can do, and some steps that you can take if you happen to be denied for an IEP. The biggest one that I heard parents tell me is that they told me that my child's grades are not impacted, so they do not qualify for an IEP. So I've heard that numerous times. Yeah, Rachel is shaking her head too. Like, I've heard that numerous times, because technically an IEP is for education.
Educational plan,
It's
yeah.
an educational plan, and if you have good grades, then why are we writing an IEP?
Right.
Just so you all know, that is illegal. You can't deny a child an IEP just because they have good grades. So anybody who has been told that we don't think your child needs an IEP because their grades are good, literally, true story, in the pandemic, they just told me, and I Facebooked it, they were trying to take Marvis off of his IEP during the pandemic where he was virtual. Y'all don't know what he capable of. So not happening.
Yeah.
So they were trying to take him off of his IEP, because Marvis started reading when he went into his IEP. He had some struggles, but Marvis, like I said, IEPs work, y'all. He is above grade level and been advanced in math, but he's now reading above grade level.
Wow, that's
And they tried to take him off of his IEP, and I was like, bet you don't.
like
So
basically.
no, just because
Wow.
he's getting good grades, you're not taking him off of his IEP. So IEPs are made to move students off of. However, grades are not the determiner. It is if they're
Exactly.
making goals.
Goals.
Is the determiner. So Terri, Andrea, anybody want to speak? So this is. So there's a question. That's a good segue. If you're denied an IEP, can you reapply? Terri, if you're denied an IEP, can you reapply?
Okay. So any decision has to be based on a proper evaluation. Okay. If you ask for evaluation, the school can deny if they don't feel like it's fit for the student. Like it's a reason for it. Because some people want their kids to, believe it or not, some people can take advantage of situations.
Yeah,
But
for a social security check.
Some do, but what the school does not want to do, so typically they go ahead and evaluate, because like I said earlier, they don't want to deny it and then come a year later, it's found that there is a disability. Well, that's a whole year. My child could have received services and you denied it. And they will actually have to go back and grant services, extended school year, or some kind of placement for the student for that missed service. So typically they don't want to deny it. But anytime a decision is made, it is through proper tiers as far as evaluation and proper assessments for evaluating your student. So if you are denied the IEP, you can go back and revisit it, but you should ask for the 504 instantly, because you see a disability and evaluate for the 504 process.
And that's good information. So please take that. Specifically what's on the screen is talking about if specifically they deny you because of grades, then that is what you can literally use to say that you can't deny me because of grades, just because I've literally had that happen 3 times where parents have told me that they said that you have good grades so you can't get an IEP. But what Terri said is really, take that to heart. If they're denied for a IEP, please ask for a 504 immediately.
Yes. And let me just say something about good grades. Grades are not measurable as far as a student's ability
Not
at all.
No.
I know students, based on grades, they getting D's and F's, But if you
Right.
sit there and talk to them intellectually, those are A students. We just ain't
Exactly.
tapped into it. That's
Right.
why it's
Yeah.
important to have an IEP. Tap into, we know where they're weak, but tap into their strength so I can lift up that weakness. I can strengthen
Exactly.
up that weakness. And that's the grades. Do not judge your child based on grades.
Please don't.
Um, don't don't. You will
No,
see.
Tiffany.
Because if it was based on grades, I wouldn't be here today. My ability was far more than what my grades could give you.
Right.
Right.
Sometimes grades can be biased, and I'm just going to tell the truth. Sometimes they could be biased.
Right.
Sometimes your students are graded on their behavior, which they should not. But
Yeah.
it's a
Yes.
teacher out there who don't like your child, and your child is going to fail their class just because they strictly don't like them. Do not judge on grades. That's why progress monitoring is needed. Progress monitor. Okay, what areas, specific areas, are they weak in, to help build that up? So I just want to put that out there about grades. Grades do not determine anything, but the
So
school
Rachel.
system's criteria.
So
Okay,
Rachel is in
sorry.
the audience, tearing up, or fake tearing up, because she has said that over and over and over again, and she is a big advocate around how grades they and you what you'll see in education is you're starting to see more and more people in education moving towards mastery,
Yeah.
as opposed to grades. Mastery
Mhm.
is a whole different paradigm shift in education that
Yes.
it is not your traditional, because if you think about it, like Terri said, you can have A pluses in classes because the work in the classes are
Easier for you.
subpar.
Yeah.
And then literally go take a state test and bomb it because there's no continuity between the class and
And
your
the
state
state
test. So really,
Right.
how whatever are these grades? You know what I mean? Or even judging by those state tests, you can have people with test anxiety. So you have
Yes.
more and more colleges that are getting rid of
Those
those standardized tests for admission.
That's right.
So schools are moving towards what's called a mastery scale, and that is
Right.
literally, do you know this strand? We're trying to teach you this specific thing. You either know it or you don't. You know it, you mastered it, or you need improvement. And if you need improvement, we are going to reteach this until you get it. So
That's right.
this is something that we are moving towards in education. So I say all of that to say that, like Rachel has been preaching forever, grades, they make us feel good, and we can
Yeah.
post them,
Yeah.
and we can say, look,
Right.
our baby got honor roll.
Yeah.
But at the
Uh-huh.
same time, they give our babies such anxiety.
Yeah.
They give our children such anxiety. And that doesn't mean that you have low expectations for your kids. But that does mean that just as parents, we have to do a little bit more work to dig deeper into what that D means.
Right.
Like, what does that D really mean?
Right. What's going on in that
What's
class?
going on in that
Do you
class?
not
What does
understand what's going on?
what does that D mean? What does that A really mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not as cut and dry. So I'm a big fan of mastery. My son goes to a mastery based school. I'm a super big fan of mastery. But
And
all
mastery
schools
is
are
all
not.
about progress over perfection.
Yep.
Progress.
Yep. And all
Progress.
schools are not there yet.
Right.
But just even outside of the IEP, just to make us more informed parents as far as like in the educational process, this is probably something that we need to think through. Like, ask your school board, ask your teachers, ask your principal about mastery and what that
Yes.
looks like and what that means, as it relates to our kids. If you're shopping for schools, like you're like, I'm pulling my kid from here and moving them there, what are you doing that for?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So these are some things that you can use, because it does. And yeah, this is something that I really had to learn, because I think I just being completely transparent, I even did my daughter a disservice with being so hyper focused on grades, where I didn't even realize until she got older how anxious that made her.
Yeah. Like I have to
And
be perfect.
I have to be perfect.
Right.
And she is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Y'all know my daughter, she brilliant, but she never tested well.
Yeah.
Ever. Never
Yeah.
tested well. Midline B's and C's student, and she was so hard on herself for it.
Right.
And this is just being completely transparent. I didn't know she had a reading disability until she was 18.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm a whole principal. But sometimes we got to check ourselves.
Right.
And we just get so caught up that, we just have to check ourselves on that. So be honest with yourself, be an advocate, but also don't, investigate why those D's are,
Right.
what those
Mm-hmm.
A's mean, right? Okay, so
I wanted to
next
say
slide.
something
Oh,
else
go ahead.
because my twins, they're in a gifted program, okay? But they also have an IEP, and people
Mm,
don't see that and don't believe that's out there.
Mm.
Because being the person I am, I advocated like, no, they don't speak well. Their
Right.
mm-hmm.
communication skills are not up to par. Although, oh, they get straight A's and they're way above. Okay, that's nice.
That's
But when
wonderful.
it comes time
However,
for communicating and talking, that's going to impede and cause either shyness or
mm,
impede their ability to express themselves. So I need them to properly know how to articulate themselves. So I
yeah.
forced it.
Mm,
Now I work in the school system, so I'm up there and they're kind of like, okay, let me get this lady done. But I let's get her that. But they get services in school and privately. I make the insurance pay for it too. You got
Yeah.
during the pandemic, the lady would phone, they would do the whole video. We're gonna do speech from school, which is free, and insurance, which I pay for.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
you
Yes.
got all you're doing is basically helping your if your child had asthma, you would not deny them a inhaler.
Taylor.
It is
Right.
no different from any disability. You would not deny
Mm-hmm.
your child. I don't care what the stigma they have, let them think. These
Mm-hmm.
kids, there are intelligent kids out here who are being overlooked because of, we care about what others think. There is no stigma. People that don't look like us been getting IEPs, okay?
Right.
Yes.
Educating their kids and providing services. And those kids going off to whatever
Yep.
trades, colleges, or whatever, and function as adults in society where we kind of enable ours because we don't want this label.
The stigma.
It is just words. It is a
Yeah, it's just
stigma that we
words.
have to get over and properly give our kids what they need. We are denying them a good education just based
Yep.
on us. So we have to stop that. Yeah, they say my child is gifted. Okay, that's what you see. But I
Yeah.
see a fault. And I'm
Right.
going to
I
give me
know.
the
Yeah.
services because I know what you're going to give them.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm there and I'm at every meeting and
Mm-hmm.
I treat it as such. Yes, I see things and yeah. So the stigma, that's a whole nother subject of culture moments, of come to Jesus moment for the Black community that we need to
Yeah.
address. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
advocate for
My
your babies.
my daughter just texted me and said, "Why you just tell the world I got dyslexia?" Naila is crazy. She literally look.
Naila, Naila, you make sure you get those accommodations in college.
Exactly.
You
Make
are
sure you
trying
Naila's
to get
get those
those
crazy.
accommodations.
She crazy, girl. That's part of your story. You are brilliant.
You are
Yes.
With
brilliant.
so this is how brilliant our kids are. Naila went her whole life having dyslexia and went to and graduated with. Now this how bright she is. Since you want to be on my thing, she had dyslexia her whole life. Graduated with 57 college credits
Wow.
Come on now.
and as a high school student. So she graduated high school
Wow.
with her high school diploma and 57 college credits and
Come
never read
on
a
now.
book. Never
Wow.
read them
Never.
books in
Girl.
high school
That tells you how
because
bright
yeah,
she is.
she
That
just was having problems, but she's intelligent enough to read the notes and conceptualize
right.
writing a whole paper about them.
Wow.
So you
Special
brilliant,
education
baby.
Yeah.
is basically, listen, it's basically the student learns a different way from that student.
From
That's
everyone
what
Right,
it
else.
is.
Yeah.
I always tell my students, you got a superpower
right.
Yeah.
because going to dyslexia, I can't do that. Autism.
Hmm.
I mean, you got to see some of my students who are autistic. They remember every single
Everything.
detail.
Ooh.
And
Yep.
I'm just staring at them like, how did you know that? And we'll correct you, and they'll be right. And you're just sitting there like an adult, like,
Yeah.
oh, you're right, you're right.
Hmm.
That's not, they're literal thinkers. You
Yes.
need
Hmm.
to tap into
Literal.
that part of brain that we don't have access to. It's a super strength. Like you
Yeah.
Hmm.
literally, they know a lot more than what we give them credit for. And it's borderline genius.
Yeah.
Hmm.
If people had to look at it and stop putting a stigma of this
Stigma on
title,
it.
go beyond the title. They have these abilities, just waiting for us to tap into it so they can just show the world how
Right,
intelligent they really are.
That
So,
is true.
right. So I think we are at our last slide, but as you can see, all of us are
okay,
passionate about what
very
we
much.
do. And like we keep saying, it is a social justice issue. It's a social justice issue from outside, but I really thank both Terri and Andrea because what we've also talked about, what we've been able to hit on today is there's some internal
Mm-hmm.
things that we as the Black community need to be doing and be responsible
Yes.
for ourselves and for our children. It can't always be what somebody is imposing on our kids. It is
Right.
2022, and at this point, ignorance is almost a choice.
Yes.
So
Yes, it is.
we have to be accountable to our community and accountable to our kids. And it can't be what just somebody else is imposing upon our kids. And that doesn't mean that those things aren't true, because nothing makes my day brighter than when I got to go check it. Oh, God help me. But
Check 'em.
no, I'm just going to be honest. When I
I got you.
identify anybody in my school who is not of the benefit of the kids in my school, y'all don't understand how good I feel about my life to get them away from our
That's
kids.
right.
Right.
It makes
That's
me
right.
happy
Right.
because I feel as if I saved them from self-esteem issues, from stuff. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
Yeah.
There are some people who do not belong in our
In the school
schools around
system.
our kids.
Yeah.
Period.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
nothing makes me happier than getting them out my school. However,
Yes.
that can't always be the narrative. Like, we are a powerful, mighty people.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we fall victim to not remembering that.
Yes.
So as we embark on Black history, we need to remember we are a powerful, mighty people who have we have traversed all of the craziness to
Right.
get to where we are. So we gotta step it up for our babies in education.
And
Exactly.
can I say the ultimate goal for both parties, the parents and the school system, is the child's success, academic
Exactly.
success, and progress. We all working together for one common goal, and that's to tap into the educational needs of our students, our child. And as a team, we got to work together for the best interest of that child.
Right.
And I love how you keep referring to that whole process as it's a team. And I just want to say this one last thing as far as in regards to parents. Do not go into the IEP meeting thinking that it's you versus them.
Absolutely.
That is the biggest mistake. Do
Yes.
not go into the IEP meeting feeling as if you've done something wrong. Go into
Absolutely.
it open minded, go into it listening, go into it with the understanding that the end result is to have your child succeed in school.
Absolutely.
Don't go
Absolutely.
into it thinking, like I said, that you did something wrong or that your child did something wrong. It is a team effort. Do not go in there thinking that it's them versus you. It's a partnership. It's a team, and
That's right.
get back to the notion of what would be beneficial for my child.
Yes.
I have a question. How do you get a child tested who is not enrolled in the schools? How old is the child? Somebody?
Who is not enrolled in the school? They're not in the school
Probably a
system yet.
homeschool baby.
No, you can go to the school system that they got early
The district.
interventions for that. The district,
Okay.
go into the district.
So Terri is saying that you can go to your home school district, Jennifer. And Rachel is also saying those educational service centers. You can do it
Yes.
there too. So our Trumbull County for Warren is the Educational Service Center, and that's out in Nows. Is it still
Yes.
out there?
Yep.
Yes. So it's out in Nows by
Planet Fitness.
Planet Fitness. Yes, it's the Educational Service Center. So yes, you can go out there and get your child tested. Let's see if there's any other questions. I think they've been doing a really good job of feeding us our questions. So if there are no other questions, I think that just concludes our talk. Yay! I hope it really helps somebody not to
Yeah.
go in this blindly.
Yeah.
So I really, really, really again want to thank both Andrea,
I did it.
parent advocate, cheerleading coach extraordinaire, and I want to thank the future Dr. West.
Yes, doctor.
Yes, Dr. West, future Dr. West. Couple more months or a couple more classes, whatever she got left. What are you, ABD?
This D baby.
Wait, you doing your dissertation?
I'm walk across that stage this year, baby.
All
I'm gonna
right.
present it this year.
Okay, so future Dr. West, we gonna send her some love and prayers to
I'm
get
about
through
to
this
change this
last leg of
world.
this doctorate. Yeah. So keeping up the
Real
good
quick,
fight for our babies.
real quick. Shout out to my deceased grandmother, rest in peace. Who
Yes.
led me to special education. She worked for Warren City Schools with special education students. That motivated me. She didn't live to see me walk across that stage, but I do this in her honor. I do this for all of us, our community. I do this for me. I try to be everything I needed as a young kid. So I'm fighting this. Um, I just want to give a shout out to her. I'll be there next week for her funeral, but she definitely let me see the ins and outs of special education and got my interest in this field.
Oh, yes. Shout out to Pastor Todd
Yes.
again and Second Baptist Church for even having this empowerment series. Thank
In
you.
London.
Oh, in London.
Our
London.
youth tech.
Yeah.
'Cause we would all
What
been
we
stuck.
so all of this technology that you are seeing. How old is London? She is 13. So all of this in and out,
Oh,
putting the
baby.
people up.
Yes.
All of this technology that you are seeing is being controlled by a 13-year-old
You
young
better go
lady.
ahead, girl.
13-year-old black girl magic.
Yes, girl.
Girl, we
Magic.
need more of you in technology. Yes. Yes. Shout out to London. Shout out to Rachel for my go-to for my pre-K information, even offline. And shout out to all of you all who tuned in. Each one teach one. Hope this helps somebody. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.
And
Thank
be
you,
blessed.
ladies. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Support Black business.